Hey everyone, Tactics here, bringing you guys another video in my plus 20 guide and walkthrough series, this time going over a Tyrannical timed plus 20 Algeth'ar Academy. In this video, I'll be going over things like our boss strategies, how we handled all of the individual pulls in here, and then some potential routing variations, plus much more. I also have similar videos just like this one for a bunch of the other Dragonflight Season 1 dungeons over on my channel and linked in the description below, with the rest coming on the way shortly, so be sure you guys do subscribe to the channel to be notified when those get posted. Now, before getting into the dungeon talk itself, if I can just have 2 minutes here to talk a little bit about the past week for me, which has been very interesting here at YouTube. I'm sure a few of you are aware of what I'm going to be talking about, but if you're just here for the dungeon, feel free to skip this a little bit. I just wanted to vent a little bit and kind of talk about my future plans as a content creator. Basically, for those unaware, I lost my YouTube account twice in the past week, once to an unknown person, and again a few days later, likely from an automated delayed ban on YouTube's side. So a suspension, lost the entire account in that case. Luckily, both times my account was able to be recovered relatively quickly within like the same day, but it certainly did open my eyes a little bit to this whole process. One bad day and everything can just kind of be gone. Everything that I've built here over the past few years, definitely a pretty scary prospect for me personally, especially with the massive amount of growth and support and love I've been getting from you guys since the launch of Dragonflight. A big thing that I've been thinking about recently throughout this past week is stability. What if I'd lost my account for more than a week, more than a month? I would have been in a lot of trouble, and that's kind of brought me to a couple of different ideas, leading to what I'm talking to you guys about now, which is kind of an announcement of something that I've been putting off for a while, something I've been wanting to do but just never got around to doing, which is the launch of my official community Discord as well as my Patreon page. The goal here is just to create another platform for myself, as well as another way to communicate with you guys if anything ever happens here, while also having the ability to increase both my financial and my platform stability as a content creator, and hopefully allow me to maybe expand my channel as well, maybe do something like bring in an editor that can help both increase the quantity and quality of my videos. Who knows what we're going to do, but the sky's the limit. It also gives me the chance to give you guys access to some of the cool new things that you've been asking for. I've had a lot of people messaging me, do I do coaching, that kind of thing. That's something I will now be officially offering through both my Patreon and my Discord. A lot of comments about my add-on profiles, my weak ores, what do I use, where do I get those? I have full lists of everything available in my Discord channel. Brand new Twitch emotes that I just got, also usable in my Discord channel as well. On top of that, I do my best to answer any questions you guys have down in the comments below, but sometimes, I'm human, I'll miss some, whatever. If you want a quick answer to questions, my supporters in my Discord will have a channel that directly sends messages to me, direct questions. If you have anything there, you can post them there. And on top of all of that, you also have your name or even a personal shout out at the end of every single YouTube video. By no means is any of this mandatory. Of course, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The biggest thing you can do to support me is absolutely free for you, is to like the video, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, and just watch my videos. This will just give me some more, like I mentioned, financial and platform stability, hopefully, and I think it's very important for me to do this in order to continue to grow myself as a creator and pursue doing this full-time, potentially. Anyways, I've talked a lot. I'll link both of those down in the description below for anyone interested. I appreciate everyone for sticking around here, whether you've been here for a week, a month, a year since the beginning, whatever it is. Your support means a lot to me. If you have any suggestions about potential rewards, things you want to maybe see, potential add-ons for the Discord channel itself, feel free to shoot me a message or leave me a comment down below. Otherwise, let's talk about Algeth'ar Academy here. And so right off the top here, your buffs. Don't forget your buffs. I think for the most part, the verse buff is extremely strong, right? It's just 5% verse. That's a lot of verse. I think in higher keys, you're going to see everyone taking the red Dragonflight verse buff. It's just really powerful. We do start right here. There is going to be, I think, the rise of a left side route as you get a bit better lust timings. It involves like shroud skipping that bridge and then going through doing a big pull with Bloodlust right off the bat. If you go right side, obviously you'll want to kind of lust the Treeboss. And so first thing, I think we did make a little bit of a mistake on this very first pull. We accidentally tapped this pat here. That will make this a little bit harder to actually group up as a tank. So what you'd want to do is see we paused here. You want to wait here until these Skitterflies pat just a little bit past here. That would make grouping this way easier. Because basically now just imagine we didn't pull these Skitterflies. They're still patting. So what would happen is I wouldn't have to stop here and get aggro. I'd be able to run mounted here, tap this mob, tap this mob here, pull those 3 Lasher packs, and then the pat of the Skitterflies would be down here and I could tap them as well. And we'd group everything up. They wouldn't already be stacked up. I wouldn't have to have stopped to grab aggro, wouldn't have to dismount, and that leads to me making a mistake here personally, which is getting hit in the tornado inside the Disorienting Puddle. Not recommended. You know, it happens though. Mistakes happen. Everybody makes mistakes. Everyone has those days, you know. So I did get hit by a Storming and die to a Swirly. I don't recommend it. Anyways, good old Thundering. We basically come back here and do this smaller now just to chill. But surprisingly, this dungeon is still timed, as I mentioned. So not the end of the world. I do think that is the pull, though. We only pull 3 Skitterflies. Again, if you notice the path thing we did, I'll back up just to show you the path thing again. So you'd wait here, wait here, wait here, wait here. These Skitterflies would be padding along still. You'd run around. You'd mount up till like here. Tag these guys. Tag these guys. Come down here, tag these guys, and then tag the Skitterflies, which would be right there. And you pull back to this area. And this would be only these mobs here. The Pat 3 Skitterflies come through the Treeboss, so just be aware, as you see there. They're coming along there. So we would avoid them if you pull far enough back, so just make sure you do that if you're grouping that. I avoid those 3 Skitterflies entirely. There are some keys where people are pulling like literally everything in that room. Certainly doable. I don't like pulling the second 3-pack of Skitterflies. They're pretty easy to avoid, and I don't recommend. They're just very dangerous mobs, right? You can make up that count elsewhere with easier trash. That's why I recommend skipping them. Anyways, we're doing this trash here. We're just doing it a little slower. And this has certainly delayed our lust by a lot now, which is a little bit unfortunate. I believe we end up scuffing a lust because of it. It's not the end of the world. Let's talk about the Treeboss. This is a boss a lot of people have trouble with. Now, if you were skipping that 3-pack there, just make sure you pull this boss back to like where we're standing right now. Just because you also still need to avoid that patrol here. So make sure you do that. And the big thing for this dungeon, just kind of mandatory in hierarchies, I think, is Poison Dispel. Make sure you have a Poison Dispel in your group. Just one is fine, but you definitely need it for this boss. Otherwise, there's a pretty good chance your tank is just kind of splatting during this. So this was recently nerfed to make the timer between the tree spawning and the next wave of flowers spawning longer. And so what you can pretty much do now is kind of nuke that tree down ASAP between germinates. Notice how we're stacked up on the boss and we all rotate in the same direction around the boss with these ad spawns to just spawn the lashers nearby. And then we're just here, we're AoEing these guys down. One thing to note is cooldown timings, right? We haven't lusted yet. I assume we'll be lusting in a second here. And the goal here again, we're killing these lashers, we're killing these branches, and notice how much time we have before burst forth, right? So we're going to be able to heal up here. We're not healing really any of these lashers go up at all. Very, very important, right? Because before, what would happen is like this germinate would go off, and then you'd be able to kill the tree after, but then it would full heal all the lashers that popped up. Very, very bad. Now you have a lot more time. Here's where we're lusting, right? We've lusted, we're popping CDs here. They're just starting to go off on these mobs because it's these even waves of lashers that are the problem, right? The odd waves, the 1, the 3, the 5, those can just be slowly cleaved down. There's no rush at all there, assuming you don't heal them with the tree, of course. It's these even ones because they still pop up quite quickly after the initial germinate cast. You need to be able to nuke them down ASAP, get poison dispels, and a note on the poison dispels, you definitely want to wait a tad bit here, let them get their initial attacks off. It'll stack up, it stacked really up to 28 there, then we dispelled it. You don't need to insta dispel, let it stack up for a few seconds and then dispel it, because usually it's not going to insta stack up to like 50 stacks, right? That's not going to happen. And so you usually want to be dispelling somewhere between like 20 and 30 stacks depending on how fast it's stacking up. As you can see here, there are some specs that are very, very powerful on this boss. Affliction Lock, doing some insanely disgusting things. Sub Rogue is insanely powerful for this boss as well. They do blast AoE. They can also funnel into that triad to nuke it down very, very quickly. And Holy DK is another example of an extremely powerful class in this dungeon. So just be aware there are some classes that make this boss significantly easier if you have access to them. So that's that. But basically that's how we continue. So we still have Lust here rolling. Our cooldowns are rolling. This next one's going to be a little bit more spooky. So again, trying to rotate. We only had one on the outside, not a big deal there. We're slowly killing these stuff. We're not too worried about nuking these lashers. We pick up the branch. Another thing to mention about the branches is it is important that a lot of you get into that branch circle. Most of you, if you can, especially if you don't have access to an evoker, specifically a preservation evoker. Of course, there is that kind of nice tech as a preservation evoker where you can echo your bleeds. Or maybe it's not echo. Echo's probably the wrong ability, sorry. But the ability where you can copy your previous cast onto other enemy or allies, rather. You can bleed dispel multiple people. As you can see here, we're not too worried about the boss itself getting ticked by this healing. It's really not the end of the world. As you can see here, it's like a 3% heal, 2.5%, 3% heal. Not the hugest deal. Not ideal, but sometimes it's just not feasible depending on the tree positioning. You can do things like knock it right before it dies, or like stun it and like pull the boss away. It's a little finicky. Just be aware. If you can do that, obviously ideal, but you don't want to miss your bleed dispel because you're already as a tank going to be taking so much damage in these lasher phases with that poison stacking up. You don't also want to have that really nasty bleed from not having cleansed yourself. So be aware of that. If you miss, obviously if you have an evoker, you could, if you have that up, you could bleed dispel it. If you're a dwarf, you can dwarf it off, that kind of thing. But just be aware that's not a bleed you want to have during this phase. Otherwise, though, we're AoEing. You can see we can chain CCs like we did there. And we don't have too much in terms of AoE stuns. We only have a couple. But then right there at the end, like it's the Affliction Lock and the Sub Rogue are blasting off on this boss fight. And from here on, we're not really worried about these lashers at all. There's no need to kill them. We're just focused on tunneling the boss. Depending on boss health, of course, you could call that. Like if this boss was at like 20% here, we'd probably also still call for a burn. Now, we actually did pull this 3-pack in, so it's going to affect the route very slightly than the one I'm actually going to link for you guys. But you can just wait for this patrol to be not terrible, and you can just run right through here. No problems with that. That brings you to the Storm guy. Nothing super crazy to talk about here. Deadly Winds obviously is extremely dangerous. This Expel Intruders can be LOS. You can still even be in, as you see here. It also doesn't really hit terribly hard, so you can just either charge back into it, like just sit in it and charge back, or jump back, or leap back, or Death Advance, whatever it is, if you're a tank, or you can use it, hit yourself against like one of these walls and stay put. Just be careful of the tornadoes coming immediately after if you do that, because if you get hit into a wall, kind of go up the wall a little bit, tornado spawns under you, very hard to dodge it. They hit very hard, so be careful of that. Otherwise, this guy just kind of chunks your tank a bit with his storm slashes, or whatever they're called. Oh yeah, storm slash. Wow, I remembered the ability name. I am learning. But from here, basically, we are really late on our Lust timer because of our timings this dungeon, because of that wipe earlier on. So usually, though, you would go over and do a pack, not to cross platform. So we're going towards Vexamus, and this would just be for Lust timings, because Croc is quite a DPS race as well. So you want to make sure, at least on Tyrannical weeks for sure, you want to be lusting that. So we're going to do a big pull over here, kind of bide our time a little bit. Big thing for these Mana Fiend mobs is your kicks are actually on Surge, the random target nuke attack. That's what you want to kick. Assign kicks to. You also want to make sure one person is assigned to each as a stop for the actual Mana Void casts. Right, we're stopping that. So he's Stormbolt, not kicking. You have a lot of kicks to assign to the actual surges themselves. Plus, we also have stops on the Scepter. The Scepter needs either 2 stops or a stop and a kick for the big AoE. It's going to be up in a second here, as well as its channel of Arcane Rain. You want to stop this ASAP. If you're not able to stop this during this initial cast, as you see, it will probably get off here. Yeah, so the cast gets off. So it is still stoppable at this point, but the problem is that the cast getting off gives it a buff. You can see the swirlies kind of spawning underneath us. So even though we stopped it, see it stopped, the swirlies are still spawning because it's a buff that goes on the mob when it starts the channel. So you need to stop it ideally before that channel goes off to just kind of make sure none of those swirlies spawn. It's not the end of the world. You have to move a bit. Kind of sucks for some casters, so stop it if you can, but it's not going to insta-wipe you like its cast going off, right? The big explosion cast, Mystic Blast. You really want to make sure that gets kicked or stopped, one of the two, just because that will instantly wipe you. Otherwise, like I mentioned, you're just doing this pack, kicking surges. The Ravager, remember the charge afterwards there will always point at the tank. That's how the direction facing works. It'll always jump to someone and then turn to the tank and frontal, so be aware of that. You can kind of manage its position, and everyone else can position away from the tank to make that easier as well. And then we're going to go, so we would have pulled these 4 mobs if we hadn't pulled the 3 extra flyers. So you basically pull these 4 mobs into this bridge pack here. If you don't pull the flyers, very easy pull. I think we do that pull. Yeah, we do that pull. Not much to talk about here. Note the battle axe bleed. Unfortunately, not backsteppable. Pretty annoying bleed. It does hurt a little bit. You don't have to do it for too long, but just something to note as a tank. And like I mentioned, you would have pulled those 4 guys back here into this pack if you hadn't accidentally pulled the flyers like we did. So we're going to go back now and start clearing the bird trash. Our lust timer would have been better, of course, had we not scuffed the intro pull. Looking at the tank, man, imagine dying as a tank, very cringe. But anyways, we're going to this platform now. This is going to be a very interesting platform to deal with on bolstering week. Otherwise, it's kind of pretty chill. These eagles do trigger on death affixes, so be careful of that. Sanguine, bursting, bolstering. It's going to be more relevant for the next pull. These swirlies always spawn near players, so you can say like relatively clustered to kind of spawn them nearby. But definitely going to be interesting for this eagle pull on like bolstering week, specifically like fort bolstering. That'll be fun. You'll probably have to like, I don't know what you're going to have to do. Like you're going to have to like hard funnel the eagle and then maybe even like have someone taunt it out. Something like that out of bolster range. I don't know. It's going to be weird because you are not going to want to 6 bolster this at like 60% HP. Same with this pack, which has 2 eagles. Definitely not going to want to do that. Definitely weird. Eagles, just make sure you have a kick for Call the Flock. It's an AoE in rage. Other than that, avoid the random target frontals. And then you get to Croth. And there are a couple ways people have been dealing with this boss here. One thing is with the Deafening Screech cast, and that's going to be the big thing here. So this, of course, is a debuff that does AoE damage around every single player, and the damage stacks up with each cast, and you refresh these stacks by using the goals. And so the question here is how many stacks can you live through? And usually that number is 4, depending on key level. If you have some big CDs you can layer on, you can do 5, and that may be better for cooldown timings because that kind of lines up your damage amp from using the fire goal at about anywhere from 1 minute 30 to 2 minutes. So obviously very good for certain specs depending on your group composition, depending on where you're able to actually activate that damage amp. If you're full of 1 minute 30 specs or specs that don't really care too much about cooldowns, obviously doing a safer reset on 4 is much better. But at the same time, if you know your fight's going to be pretty damn long, doing a reset at 4 may mess you up later on in the fight if you're going to have to end up taking like a 6 stack later on because you tried to clear at 4, right? So sometimes it may just be better to clear at 5 every single time just to survive. The default thing has been to do fire first, which is why I mentioned that. So if you do it at around 4 stacks, it's going to be about 1.5 minutes into the fight. 5 stacks is about 2 minutes into the fight, so depending on your composition, you may prefer something else. Just note that you will need personals for sure, starting on like maybe 3, but definitely 4 and 5. And at the same time now, as a tank, Savage Peck absolutely trucks. This also was buffed recently, because why not, to not be parryable. Previously, like sometimes as a warrior, you would get lucky and parry it. You know, Demon Hunters get lucky and parry it, though they have a bit more parry. Particularly DKs could parry this a fair bit when they had weapon up, that kind of thing. So no longer parryable. You're always going to have to deal with this very nasty bleed, which gets scarier and scarier as the fight goes on. See, I move into D-stance as soon as the first peck comes out, and I'm chilling in D-stance. You cannot pay me to leave D-stance on this boss fight. So be aware of that. So this is our second Screech, already hitting relatively hard here. I believe we only do 4 stacks here, but we can fast forward a little bit. So the third stack comes out. I don't know, third stack already did. Let's go to the third stack. Third stack, there it is. Okay, so third stack's coming out here. So you can see how much that's chunking us. So no personal, no, that was Devo actually. So that was through Devo on that third stack. So we've decided we're going to go clear at 4 stacks here. So I'm going to be rallying this 4th stack coming up. And you can see someone's like just prepping, actually using this. And what we're going to do here it is, rally goes out. And ideally what you would do here is you'd milk this a little bit. You could have milked this a little bit more just because you just need this to go off before the next Deafening Screech cast. So what you can do is you can actually have waited probably about 6 to 7 more seconds before putting that last ball in. And that would have milked it and it would have interrupted the boss just before, like a few seconds before its next Deafening Screech, which essentially buys you almost an entire full Deafening Screech in terms of boss fight time before you start running out of time. So note that. And as you see here, cooldowns are popping off. We are blasting into this boss here at 4 stacks. And then we're going to be dealing with this fire for the rest of the fight. The tornadoes, interesting little tech you can do with the tornadoes that spawn from the wind is what I've seen a lot of groups doing is actually pulling it off this platform because the tornadoes seem like bound to this little like stone platform, but the boss doesn't reset on the grass. So you can pull it over onto the grass. I don't think we do that here. But we're just basically now doing the same thing, having our stacks build up again, and you kind of need to judge boss health based on where you need to clear here. Like if you're like really chill on boss health, you could like do a reset on like 2 or 3 and just be like, hey, we don't need to get this damage out of control. Boss is very low. We don't need to take this to 4 stacks. It's fine. Or if you're still trying to milk boss damage, if it's a high Tyrannical key, you need the boss fight time, you can just take this again to like 4 stacks. Just again, be careful. Make sure you are personaling as needed for those higher stack counts of Deafening Screech. As you see here, we're triggering here at 3 stacks. So we trigger at 3 stacks here just because of boss health. We don't want to go to that 4 stack. Tornadoes here, and as you can see, all these tornadoes are bound to the stone platform, as I was saying. So you can actually pull this boss off of the stone platform onto the grass and not have to worry about dodging any of these tornadoes. See, it's like just on the edge of the grass here. You can just pull like up to the front there is what I'm talking about. Much easier to handle if you do that. But otherwise, we're just focused now, low reset damage counts on our Shriek. But as you can see, as a tank here, I'm getting absolutely blasted from this bleed, from the Shrieks, from everything really. So it is definitely a very scary tank damage fight for sure. Bleed doesn't reset on the boss time, so be careful of running away from your group if you have the bleed still. But that's Croth. So another boss you want to be lusting on. So with this right side route, of course, you're lusting on Mr. Treeman. You're lusting on Croth by doing a little bit of clearing in front of your path and then backtracking very slightly. Then we're moving over towards Vexamus, whatever. And this is a boss that you're not going to be lusting. This is one of the easier bosses in the whole dungeon. Pulling just a bunch of Foragers and Ravagers here, not too much to talk about. One of the big pulls here, if you went left, would be like pulling the stuff up to this first pack over here with the double Mana Fiend and the Axe and the Textbook. Textbook, again, needs a kick or a stop on that channel thing there. And then, of course, the Mana Fiends, like I mentioned, kicks on the Surge, stops on the Mana Void. That's how we handle those. And all these 3 packs are like that. You could, if you really had a lot of AoE CCs and like Bloodlust and all cooldowns, maybe pull 2 of these together. But the problem is on higher keys, you just don't have the kicks to handle this pack, right? There's going to be 4 Mana Voids, there's going to be 4 Surges, there's going to be 2 books. It's a lot to handle. So if you aren't able to kill the pack quickly, very quickly in AoE CCs, and like 1 round of kicks, you're going to be in trouble. And so that's why I would recommend only doing that if you're doing the left side route and you're doing like a big lust cooldown pull right off the top, then you could pull those together. We're obviously not. We did a right side route, so be aware of that. Last pull here, and we're coming to Vexamus. I'm going to say the boss's name wrong a lot, by the way. But basically for this boss, what you're trying to do is kind of manage your damage intake, making sure that your tank is soaking as many of these arcane orbs as possible, both to kind of concentrate the magic debuff on a single player, but also to make sure that other players aren't in danger for when the overlap comes out with the mana bombs. That's what you're really worried about. But you're not too concerned right now for this first arcane set, for some of the orb sets as well. You know, you've soaked the orb, you have plenty of time before a mana bomb cast comes out, but that really lethal thing you're looking for is the mana bombs, and whenever it overlaps with anything else. So when it overlaps with orbs, when it overlaps with the arcane expulsion, either of those are very, very scary overlaps for anyone who has a bomb at that point, and that's when you're going to want to pop personals, or because that's when you're likely to actually die. For the tank, they're not actually very concerned. The biggest damage hit is that frontal cone that comes out. So they're actually pretty free to soak up the bulk of your orbs here. And what we do is we kind of position towards an edge here, and I kind of like drag the boss along the edge. Melee are aware, see they have a mana bomb, sorry, excuse me. They run out to the edge, drop their mana bomb, and they come back. They always know I'm going to chill around an edge, soak everything that comes near me, and point this arcane expulsion out towards the edge of the platform. They always know, like, kind of towards the center of this room is going to be that safe area. And basically, this boss doesn't move too much, just along the edge here as I need to kind of shift back and forth to get those soaks. Fissure coming out deals a big chunk of damage. This isn't a super close, scary overlap. With the mana bombs, there's a bit of a delay, but I think it's the one at 2 or 3 minutes into the fight is pretty close together, and where you want to commit things like cooldowns, really commit things like Devo and Rally to that, because that's very, very spooky. But otherwise, this boss is relatively simple. That's why we aren't committing Lust to it. Probably one of the easier ones. Not a ton of damage. Maybe the last boss is easier, actually. We'll probably see. But see, making sure I get those soaks here. If that Thundering was still up, I would have just eaten the stun to make sure I get that soak, because otherwise it deals a pulse of party damage. And as you see, like, the bulk of the debuffs are being soaked by myself. But if ranged can get some of these far ones when they initially spawn, just because of where they're standing, they will eat one. I don't think ever really are going to eat more than one per person, just because we don't have access to unlimited magic dispels. I say that, but this is like the most magic dispels you're ever going to get in a group, because we have a Shadow Priest, a Warlock, and a healer. But a lot of groups, you aren't going to have access to that, right? You're going to have like maybe your healer, maybe one other form of magic dispel from a DPSer. So you really want to make sure you're concentrating as many of those on your tank, and that as a DPSer, the next spawn will come before your debuff expires usually. So make sure you actually let your debuff fall off naturally before touching another orb. Like I mentioned, the thing that's going to kill you here is like soaking too much as a DPS player, or an overlap with the arcane fissure, rather, not arcane expulsion. I think I said that earlier. The arcane fissure with the mana bombs, or the mana bombs with the arcane orbs soak. So be careful. Mana bombs are the real danger here. Here's that arcane fissure. Here's that overlap. That's what I was talking about. Arcane fissure instantly into a mana bomb cast. This is really, really scary because healer has to be moving. Mana bombs are coming out. Everyone just took a big hit, and then you're also taking mana. Look how much damage. That is the big spooky overlap. That's through Devo here as well. So be very, very careful with those things. If you're able to survive through those overlaps, you're going to get through this boss just fine. So that's this boss fight. From here, we are skipping the bridge still. I really don't like this. These are extremely inefficient packs because it's just like, if you wanted to pull these together, like I mentioned, you just would not have the kicks, right? There's 2 Mana Fiends here and a Scepter, 2 Mana Fiends here. 5 kicks already. Like, how are you going to handle that unless you have a lot of cooldowns? And like I mentioned, if you want to do a big pull there, you would skip past that and do the big pull on the platform, because the platform is, of course, mandatory trash. You have to kill that trash to spawn Vexamus anyways, and so you kind of just have to choose which trash you're doing and which you're not, because I think you also want to do some big pulls here at the end of the dungeon, though. We'll talk a little bit about that now, because the big thing you want to avoid is pulling too many of the arcane missiles mobs up here. Can't remember the name off the top of my head. I'll tell you when I see it. Basically, off the top, we're doing a bunch of Echo Knights, because Echo Knights are relatively free. It's the Invokers, and the way these Invokers work is they will just spam arcane missiles. Like, it hurts. And this is, my understanding is arcane missiles is supposed to be a tank only hit, and for like a week or two there, it was hitting everybody, like random targeting. Potentially it was like a bug, like a group thing with like MM hunters or something like that, but I don't think it's supposed to hit anyone but the tank. At least that's my thoughts of it. So be aware, but even if it's only hitting the tank, it still trucks. So you don't want to pull too many of these invokers. You want to make sure you have kicks on them. The one thing you actually don't want to kick is this Astro Bomb, because as you see here, you can use this Astro Bomb on the pack itself, similar to like Ruby Life Pools, those mobs upstairs with the fire circle. You can use that bomb on the mobs here to blow them up a little bit. As you see, kicks on Arcane Missiles, but they still hurt quite a bit. And we're just using AoE stops here on these Echo Knights to prevent those whirlwinds from absolutely nuking the melee too much. Especially during this raging time, be careful as a melee for sure. You may just want to walk away during raging whirlwinds because they do hurt. And what we're then going to pull here to finish off our trash is not actually this pack. As you can see here, this is a double invoker pack. This is double invoker. And so pulling any of these other packs that have 2 invokers in them with another pack is like you just want your tank to die. Pretty much. And so what your goal here is to pull together packs you can to have no more than 2 invokers in a pack. See here, there's one invoker, dude, I can't say this. There's one invoker over there, but any nearby pack is double invoker, and over there in the corner. So what we end up doing here is there's a nice little pack beside this door here, which is 1 Restorer, 1 Invoker, and 1 Echo Knight, which we pull into this pack, which is 2 Echo Knights, 1 Invoker, 1 Restorer. So you just have to deal with 2 Invokers in this pull. You've got the Restorers, which have the Shield Cast, which is not a big deal because we have access to Purges and Stops, and you'd LOS inside this room. See there, I popped out a tiny bit so you can see me out there. I should have hugged the wall a little bit more. And then basically we just have kicks assigned to these invokers to make sure that the tank doesn't get nuked. Ideally, you don't actually want to kick those Astro Bombs like I mentioned. The kicks should be for the the Arcane Missiles. And as you saw there just previously, the stuns work as well because Arcane Missiles is a channel. They will just quickly recast those. So you really want to focus on kicks, stops, kind of these will just get incidentally stopped by you using stops on the Whirlwind, in my opinion. And this is a very scary pull for tanks as well. So make sure you're committing defensives as you saw there. Committed quite a few of them. Why not send them? This is much scarier than the boss fight for a tank. Another boss fight coming up that's not really scary for the tank at all. So commit your defensives here for sure. And then we get into the last boss. And this boss is, honestly, it's not too bad, especially if you manage using your stacks well and you don't like drop circles in the center of the room here. I mean, I don't know, there's not too much to talk about this fight. The energy bombs, they go on random players. Once you hit 3 stacks, you'll drop a circle on the ground that shoots spheres out. You really want to try to like notice when you're at 2 stacks and drop that out away from your group here. And obviously, if you end up having a bad drop, you can move the boss away. The boss doesn't reset for a large portion of this room. Watch the random target breath. It's very dangerous. Note for the energy bombs too, technically it is spell reflectable. You can spell reflect it back onto the boss. Just note if you stand within the center of the circle that goes around the boss. Actually, I think I might do it. Oh, I missed that one. I do think I do it at some point, so let me see if I can find it. Anyways, so there it is. Okay, so basically, you can spell reflect it back onto the boss. If you stand directly in the circle, you will still get a stack, but you can stand, like I'm on the edge of it. This doesn't count as being inside of it. So you can stand on the edge of it to actually still have melee uptime and not be hit by that circle. So be aware of that. Basically just making so you don't get an entire stack. As you see that, well, that would have been my 3rd stack. So luckily I was able to spell reflect that. Otherwise here, as you see, we dropped the circle down very, very far away. People know when they're going to get their 3rd stack. They drop it on the edge of the room. And I'm able to now leave all the space down here on this bottom part of the room. So we can just come move the boss a little bit. And it's very, very easy to avoid these spheres coming from really, really far away. As you can see, again, like dropping it in the middle of the room, very, very bad. Concentrating where we're dropping these all on the edge of the room because people know when they're getting that 3rd stack, right? You know, unless you get clipped by something by accident, you know, so position yourself accordingly. And that is pretty much this boss fight. Not too difficult, one of the easier ones in the whole dungeon, honestly. But there you have it, guys, my walkthrough of a +20 Tyrannical Algeth'ar Academy. Hopefully this video does help you out, helps you get your key timed, and if it did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like it. Don't forget to also check out my brand new Discord channel community and my Patreon linked down in the description below. Any and all support is very much Appreciate it. If you have any questions at all regarding this dungeon, tanking in general, Mythic Plus, whatever it is, leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer. Or you can stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics, where I stream all these high keys and Mythic rating from a tank's perspective, and I'll do my best to answer there. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.